Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video I'll be creating a gatefold shutter card, and I'm just going to quickly peel off all of this blue tape. I was experimenting with sizes and wanted to dry run everything, make sure that the mechanism works out well. I don't have a special die set to create this shutter card, so I just use some of the basic shape dies that I have, and I'll let you know the dimension of everything so that if you have something similar in your stash, you may be able to create the same thing. So I've already cut my card base to 10 inches wide by 7 inches tall, and along that 10-inch length I scored at 2.5 inches and 7.5 inches, and that gives me a card base, a gatefold card base that will fold down to 5 by 7. Then I've got these matte layers that I've cut to 2 3/8 by 6 3/4, and I am not leaving a white border on the inside edge because I want this to look like it's just one solid piece on a regular card front as opposed to a gatefold card front, and that way you can actually read the printing or the sentiments that are tiled on this paper. And this is a digi paper from Polkadoodles. I don't remember what paper bundle it came from, but I'll leave links to everything in the description box below once I've looked them up. And because I did print them on my home printer and it was just printed on just thin digital copy paper, I did use a combination of dry adhesive all the way to the edge and then Kalal all-purpose glue on the inside. And the reason why I chose the Kalal all-purpose is because that's a solvent-based glue as opposed to a water-based glue, so it won't soak into your paper and potentially warp it. And that's why it's particularly good for thinner papers like this. Now, my printer did something a little bit funny. The first two panels that I cut down were leftover from an earlier project, and I wanted to add some matte layers on the inside of my card as well, so that if this card is displayed open, it still has a sentiment on the inside. And so I needed to print off more of this pattern paper, which is the nice thing about having digi papers, because if you run out, you can very easily print off more. However, I think one of my ink cartridges was running low on ink because I ended up with this ombre effect on my paper, which I actually rather like, but I'm lucky that I actually don't have to put this paper side by side the first set of panels that I cut down, because then they're not gonna match up. So I definitely recommend that if you are working on a project that you know will, or you think might require multiple sheets of paper, maybe try to print off more than you need, because hopefully you're more likely to actually have more consistent color between sheets as opposed to what I've got going on here. But I don't mind the ombre look. I actually kind of like it, and I don't have to put this side by side with the first two panels that I applied, so I don't think it's going to be quite as noticeable that it's I didn't get consistent coloring. Okay, so here I've got what will be my shutter panels, and actually what I used to cut this is a set of bunting dies from Tonic Studios. It's got a variety of sizes of bunting that you can cut out, and this is the largest size. So because this is white on white, I wanted to kind of diagram this out so that you can see how they fit together. The blue lines are the score lines on my card panel, and so between the two blue lines will be the 5-inch width of my card when it's completely closed. The green lines are the outlines to the shutter panel. So the thicker green line is the panel that's in front, and the thinner one is the one behind it. And this is how the panels will be when the card is fully closed. And so where you see the 2 pink strips, that's just red line tape that I've already applied to the 3/8 inch glue tab that I have on both of these shutter panels. And so when you're determining the size of this, there's a couple of things. You have to make certain that your shutter panel will actually fit in this orientation within the width of your card. And then you also want to make sure that when it's fully opened, and you'll see that in a bit, that it shows enough of your focal image or sentiment that's going to be revealed when the shutter opens. So to apply this, I just lay these down in the position that you saw it earlier when I freeze framed it, and I just peeled off that red line tape and added a line of liquid adhesive just to make sure it was a nice permanent stick. And here's the image that I want to have revealed. So it's this lovely penguin that is also a digi from Polkadoodles. And so I'm gonna just go ahead and glue this down to my card base. Now you could stamp or stamp and color your image or your sentiment directly onto your card base, but I knew I wanted to color this image with alcohol markers, and that's why I went ahead and created a separate panel for this. That way I don't have that bleed through from the alcohol marker coloring onto the back of my card. So, but if you're just going to stamp a sentiment, you can definitely just stamp that right onto your card base. And I have really been going crazy with adding these little white jelly roll accent highlights, and so I've been doing it, I think, on pretty much all of my colored images these days, and I really like it. So so I added that as just a final detail. And that's what it looks like fully open. So you want to open your 2 gatefold panels and then lay your shutter flat against the card, folded at where that glue tab is. And so you can just experiment with the width of your shutter panel so that you have enough of that, that diamond opening or aperture that will show enough of your image or your sentiment that you want to have revealed. But make sure that those fishtail ends of your shutter do overlap. If they don't, then it may not open and close smoothly. So here I'm showing, I've already got this green panel laid right where it will ultimately be adhered to my card base, and this is going to go over my shutter bunting panels. And I've just picked a circle die that essentially matches the width of the diamond that's created by the 2 shutter panels, and I'm going to die cut the circular aperture from the green panel, the green card solid color cardstock that you see there, and that's going to sit over top of our shutter panels, and that's what's going to keep those panels intact but allow the panels to slide open and close. So we want to just cut out this aperture so that you can see right through to the back of the card base. And so hopefully, you know, between a just regular bunting die and a nested circle die set, I was able to create my shutter mechanism. Now this aperture panel here, this green panel, is cut to 4 1/8 inches wide by 8 inches high. And along the 8-inch edge, I just scored 1/2 inch glue tabs at the top and the bottom. And again, I'm applying some red line tape to that so that we have a nice strong stick, because all of these are sort of, you know, helping to keep the mechanism in place. But when I go to glue this down, I'm just going to squiggle on a little bit of liquid adhesive just to make sure it's a nice permanent stick as well. And the how you determine how wide this piece needs to be is actually based on the size of the glue tab that you used on your shutter. So my 2 shutter pieces, I scored 3/8 inch glue tabs on those. But if you went with a more narrow glue tab, like maybe 1/4 of an inch, then you can cut a wider aperture panel in front. And it just depends on the look that you want to go for. If you wanted a wider panel so that you can see less of the white card base, then you can opt for that. But that panel needs to have enough room to allow for those 2 glue tabs to lay down flat. And so that's how I arrived at the 4 1/8 inch sizing for that top panel. So now the last thing to do is actually create a closure for this card, because those 2 gates have this natural tendency to kind of pop open like you see there. And I did foil a few different options in a few different colors, just so that I have some options to play with. And the banner or the belly band that I've cut out of this green cardstock, it doesn't actually have to stretch the full wrap around the card fully, because especially if you're gonna do what I do here, where I actually use a just like a topper element to close that up, because you're not going to see the center portion there, since your topper will adhere right over it. And so the 2 options I had were this one here, where I just took that circle aperture that I cut from the inner panel, and I just cut it down just a smidge more so that I have a nice matte layer for one of my foiled sentiments. And that particular foiled sentiment does actually have a Christmas sentiment on it. So I thought maybe I do want a Christmas sentiment on this card, and not, just rely on the pattern paper for my Christmas sentiment. But then I really like the boldness of the foiled, kind of, it almost looks like one of those award ribbon, because it's got the zigzag border to it, but it reads "Handmade for You," which I thought was really nice, sort of not really a sentiment for the card, but just like a nice little note to let them know that this is a handmade card. And since the belly band gets pulled off, you don't really lose anything in terms of having to rely on it to be the sentiment for my card. So that's why I went with this. Plus, I like how much gold foiling is on there. It's a really nice contrast, where the other one had a little bit more subtle foiling, and it was just too light for me. I like how bold this was, and how solid a foiling it was. So here's the card as you open it up to reveal the image of this sweet little penguin popping out of a box. So kind of like that, he's sort of popping out from your aperture, but he's also popping out of a little gift box too. I hope that you liked my card today, and if you did, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. And if you want to catch new videos as I publish them, consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell. Thanks so much, and until my next video, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.